Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to explore the completely fascinating world of viral vector biomanufacturing. If you've ever found yourself wondering how these life-saving gene therapies are actually made in the real world, I want you to picture a factory. But scratch that image of conveyor belts and heavy clanking machinery. What we're really talking about here is building a microscopic factory, one where living cells are the actual engines of production. Today, we're zeroing in on the absolutely critical early stages of this whole process.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the producer cell foundation, move into scaling up the bioreactors, look at AAV upstream and harvest, then tackle lentivirus and managing envelope fragility. And finally, we'll hit controls and yield challenges. Just a quick note, we are taking a strict factory floor tour of the upstream processes today, and we're going to stop right before we hit downstream purification.
All right, moving into section 1, the producer cell foundation, building the workforce. Every great factory needs a super reliable, hardworking workforce, right? Well, in biomanufacturing, our workforce consists of producer cells. Getting these cells prepped and ready to manufacture viral vectors, that is our very first major challenge.
There are basically two primary ways we equip this microscopic workforce for the job. First up is transient transfection. Think of this kind of like handing an instruction manual to the workers literally right before their shift starts. The producer cells are transfected with plasmids, which are basically the genetic instructions, afresh for every single production run. It's super flexible, but it requires a lot of high-quality plasmid DNA every single time. Alternatively, we have the stable producer cell line. In this approach, the cells are already pre-engineered to carry the components needed for vector production. The instructions are completely hardwired in. And this choice between transient and stable, it's absolutely foundational because it dictates the complexity, the cost, and the design of the entire upstream workflow we're about to explore.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that you can't just scoop up random cells for a $1 million gene therapy batch, right? To solve all that inherent biological variability, a rigorous cell banking system, which is split into master and working cell banks, provides a consistent, characterized starting population. Some platforms also use a very similar virus seed system. And before they see any routine use, these banks are intensely scrutinized. We're looking at identity, purity, making sure they are totally free from unwanted adventitious agents. This meticulous level of management is the absolute bedrock that guarantees batch-to-batch consistency across the whole life cycle of a product.
Okay, section 2, scaling up the bioreactors, the factory floor. So we have our cellular workforce. Now we actually need to build the factory floor where they're going to grow and produce. Let's look at our 3 main culture formats. First, we've got adherent culture. This is where cells literally need to stick to a surface to grow. It's relatively simple to start up, kind of like growing cells in a flat flask. But to scale it up, you need exponentially more surface area, which very quickly becomes just physically unmanageable. Second, we have suspension culture. Here, cells grow freely floating in liquid media, typically in these big stirred tank bioreactors. This scales so much more readily because, well, to make more product, you generally just need a larger volume tank, not a massive sprawling surface. Finally, the fixed bed bioreactor acts as a really cool bridge. The cells attach within a densely packed bed inside a single vessel. It offers this clever route to scale up adherent-type cultures without forcing the cells to fully adapt to a free-floating suspension environment. To put that all into perspective, let's look at a fictional educational case study. Imagine a biomanufacturing company named Vectra. They're tasked with scaling up a fragile lentiviral process for a cell therapy partner. So how do they actually do it? Well, the main anticipated benefit of transferring their process from an adherent format over to a suspension culture is improved scalability. By moving to suspension, Vectra can simply increase their bioreactor size rather than building an entire warehouse full of flat cell culture vessels. It's definitely a complex transition, but it's absolutely essential for making these therapies accessible at a massive commercial scale. And that brings us to section 3, AAV upstream and harvest. So the crucial point here is that the platform you choose fundamentally dictates your entire process. And we're going to look specifically at the life cycle of adeno-associated virus, or AAV. Here is the high-level upstream flow for AAV. Step 1, cell expansion. The starting cells are really carefully multiplied through a very defined culture process. Step 2, production culture. This is where the magic happens, and the cells actually generate the AAV particles. Step 3, cell lysis. We'll get to exactly what that means in a second, but basically, it's about breaking things open. And finally, step 4, clarification, where we clean up the mixture to collect our vector.
Let's zero in on that third step, lysis. Lysis is a deliberate step used to break open the cells and release intracellular AAV particles for harvest. Now, why is this so necessary? Well, because AAV is largely produced intracellularly. The viral particles get physically trapped inside our microscopic cellular factories. So to harvest them, we literally have to crack those factories open. After we break the cells via lysis, we use clarification steps to filter out all that leftover cellular debris and the larger particulates, which leaves us with a fluid containing our precious AAV vector. But here is where we hit a really major manufacturing headache. In AAV production, the cells don't always get it right. Actually, a batch might yield roughly 35% full capsids, which contain the therapeutic payload, and a staggering 65% empty capsids, which have no payload at all. An empty capsid is literally just the outer viral shell. Because only the full capsids can deliver the therapeutic effect, having this high proportion of blanks directly impacts the required dose, the potency, and potentially even the patient's immune response. It's a huge hurdle. Now, it's really tempting to think of this empty-full ratio as purely a downstream purification problem, like we'll just sort it out later, right? But in reality, upstream consistency directly affects the proportion of full genome-containing capsids you get in the first place. The health of your cells, the exact timing of the transfection, the specific conditions inside that bioreactor. Mastering those parameters is exactly how you maximize your yield of full, effective vectors before purification even begins.
Let's move to section 4, lentivirus, managing envelope fragility. And let's see how this builds into an entirely different set of challenges when we swap AAV for lentivirus. Lentiviral and retroviral vectors have very distinct biology. For starters, they often require multiple genetic elements to be supplied together, which makes transient transfection highly common. But the absolute most critical difference is that these vectors have an envelope. This envelope is a lipid layer, and it determines exactly which target cells the vector can enter. However, this envelope makes them incredibly fragile. They are highly, highly sensitive to physical and chemical stress. Because of this added complexity, maintaining really intense control over your input plasmids and raw materials is completely vital to ensure the virus is assembled correctly lot after lot. And this fragility totally changes the game when it comes time to harvest. Remember how AAV requires harsh lysis to crack those cells open because it's non-enveloped and really tough? Well, lentivirus, on the other hand, buds off the cell directly into the surrounding liquid. If you were to use harsh lysis on a lentivirus, you'd tear its delicate envelope to shreds, basically rendering it useless. So lentiviral harvest requires a much, much gentler clarification process to recover that supernatant liquid while carefully preserving those really fragile viral envelopes. Because lentiviral vectors actually integrate into the patient's DNA, safety is obviously paramount. And that brings us to replication-competent virus, or RCV testing. We engineer these vectors to deliver a payload and then just stop. They should never, ever be able to multiply on their own. So RCV testing is a defining safety control to confirm no vector particles capable of self-replication have inadvertently arisen during manufacturing. It directly addresses a specific really high-stakes risk that is inherent to these integrating vector classes. All right, Section 5, Controls and Yield Challenges. We've covered the distinct pathways of AAV and lentivirus, so let's head into our final section where we'll look at the universal parameters that govern this entire microscopic factory. It takes incredibly precise inputs to keep these platforms running safely and consistently. We discussed cell banks providing our consistent starting workforce, and plasmids acting as the genetic software. Then there's media and reagents, basically the food and environment, that directly dictate cell health and vector yield. We also rely really heavily on single-use components, like plastic bioreactor bags, to eliminate cross-contamination risks. And this brilliantly illustrates how, above all else, strict supplier qualification is totally necessary to ensure every single one of these raw materials meets exact specifications before it ever even enters the clean room. But here's the thing, controlling your inputs just isn't enough. You have to actually monitor the process as it's happening. As they say, in-process controls monitor the process itself, not just the final product. You really cannot wait until you have a final, sealed vial of gene therapy to find out if something went wrong 3 weeks earlier inside the bioreactor. Typical in-process controls involve constant, real-time checks on things like cell growth, viability, and step-specific harvest yields.
By constantly taking the pulse of our manufacturing line like this, we achieve early detection of process drift. If the temperature is even slightly off, or the cells aren't dividing exactly as expected, the engineers can spot the trend immediately. Catching this drift early doesn't just save millions of dollars in ruined batches, it supports really confident, data-driven decisions when it comes time to officially release the final batch for patient use.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We've seen just how incredibly delicate and complex it is to build these microscopic factories. If mastering this upstream bioreactor phase, improving cell lines, optimizing media, fine-tuning the harvest, is truly the key to solving massive bottlenecks like that empty capsid challenge we talked about. Well, what new cell line breakthroughs do you think will define the next generation of affordable gene therapies? Because unlocking those upstream secrets, that is exactly what's going to make the gene therapies of tomorrow scalable, potent, and ultimately affordable for the patients who need them the absolute most. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.